Today's episode is brought to you by Musical Theater Radio's merch store. Looking for that perfect gift for someone or just want to treat yourself to some great musical theater themed merch? Head to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the All Things Theater button on the homepage and check out all the different designs available. And now, today's interview. Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yoraff. Today, we are speaking with the writing team of Connor and Smith, and we're going to learn more about them and their works. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right to it and welcome Matt Connor and Stephen Gregory Smith to the show. Hello, Matt. Hello, Stephen. How are you today?
Hello, everybody.
Hey there.
It's great to be here.
Great. So before we get into everything, I always ask for a 30-second bio, just so we get to know you real quick off the top. So Matt, we're going to start with you. Who are you in 30 seconds?
I am from a town called Stephenson, Virginia, just 2 exits south of where I went to the conservatory, Shenandoah Conservatory. From there, I moved to New York twice, but landed to be my hometown, my artist town in Washington, D.C. I was a commissioned writer for Signature Theater. I was an equity actor there. And since then, I've branched out and I've had shows that have been produced, I guess I would say all over the world, including Europe and Australia. And Stephen and I met in college 20 some years ago.
Nice. And Stephen, 30 seconds. Who are you?
I am Stephen Gregory Smith. I am a Helen Hayes Award-winning actor. We are both Helen Hayes Award nominated and winning directors, and Charles MacArthur nominated for adaptation for our Ichabod, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow 2 years ago. We have been together for 27 years and have been writing together since 2010. We tend to kind of like the same kind of material, are drawn to the same kind of pools a lot. And that's always kind of darker material, but it's not the darkness that draws us there. It's how do you find the light from the darkness? And that's kind of our commonality and what we share as a creative team. We're always kind of going back there. We're also big fans of history, unknown history, untold history, and or adaptations of things that are maybe lesser known to the general public as it stands today.
Nice. So I'm curious.
That was so much better than mine.
Well, that's whoever gets to go second always gets to go, oh, I forgot this. I want to say this. And so no worries. Do you want to add like a 10-second addition, Matt?
No, I'm just embarrassed that he said he's a Helen Hayes Award-winning actor. I'm a Helen Hayes Award-winning director, but I didn't bring it up. But now that he brought it up, it's true.
Nice. So I want to take it back almost to the beginning of, were you guys always into musical theater growing up, or is that something you discovered a little bit later in life? Matt, I want to start with you.
I actually was involved heavily in the church.
Mm.
And so I thought that I was going to be a minister. I had started that route of becoming a minister. I actually joined a gospel group. I taught myself how to play the piano at the age of 8 after 8 months of lessons. I didn't know what I was doing. And I just had this sort of very unknown intuition musically that I couldn't explain or understand. And it caused a lot of anxiety. But anyways, I did join this gospel group and we would tour around in a little van. It was called Expressions. And I had these little note cards with the chords of the songs on them that I used to have to take home and write down the chord progressions off these little cassette tapes. Well, on some random evening, the lead singer would say, "Hey, I'm a little sick tonight. Can we take it down a key or two?" And I would have to go in the bathroom and do the math. And that's when I really started first doing my own sort of like modulation of keys, of just knowing what the math was. Anyways, from there, I really started to realize my true love was music. That led me to the conservatory with a friend of mine who was going there at the same time, Shenandoah University and Conservatory in Winchester, Virginia, about an hour and 15 minutes from Washington, D.C. And that's when I started really pursuing music theater, which really was not a huge forte in my life because my life was mainly kind of church driven, although I was in a a horribly busted production of Anything Goes in high school. I was not the person who was in classes, dance classes and music classes. Everything to me was very organic. And then Steve and I met there. We were not together immediately in college, but we definitely realized a kinship in our relationship with musicals and the arts.
And Steven, was young Steven looking at the show tunes, or was that something a little bit older? Was older Steven?
Yeah, I was. I was also like looking at old monster movies, like
Mm.
black and white Universal, or like Atomic Age, giant bug things, because my dad loved them so much, and he would tell me, I saw this at the drive-in. So I wanted to see all those things that they would play on like Saturday afternoons on TBS, And so I was into that, but then my Nana lived two doors down. And when my parents weren't home, when I came home from school, I would go to her house and she would play cast recordings on, vinyl. And I'll never forget hearing West Side Story for the first time in her living room and just like leaning into the record player, like I was imagining all of it. And then I think the second one I ever heard was My Fair Lady. And then my brothers would do the High School Musical because you could hang out with girls easy. And so then I got exposed to No No Nanette, 42nd Street, My Fair Lady, and then I couldn't wait to do it myself. And I started watching like all the movie musicals that I could find at the video store. And then I met through our church, the preacher's daughter and I became like best friends. And we were both music theater obsessed. So we were in our high school musical because we went to the same, high school. And then we became part of this little club who did the musicals, who we would trade CDs and say, you've got to listen to this one and this one and that one. And I remember going, what's this? Passion by Sondheim. This is weird, and listening to it once and going, I don't get it. Of course, I didn't, and I wouldn't for many years, but so yes, I was very aware, and that kind of carried with me into college, and then you go out into the industry, and there's so much musicals that you're like, I can't listen to it anymore. But you have to keep kind of discovering new things, and that's why I love musical theater radio because I've been discovering lots of new things.
Oh, thank you very much. Um, yeah, I love discovering new works too. Because I was about to say, what was your gateway musical? Because everybody seems to have one. Different generations have different ones, right? Right now, it seems to be Wicked and Hamilton are the big ones. There was the Rent period. There was the Phantom and Les Mis period. There was like, do you remember your gateway musical? The one that you went, ah. I know, Stephen, you mentioned West Side Story, but was there another one that just solidified it?
For me, it was probably the first show I was in. So the first, because after I saw my brother in My Fair Lady, I was determined that I was also going to produce My Fair Lady in my basement. And when my parents didn't believe me, I started building sets with scrap wood. And then they said, we got to do something about this. So they saw in the paper there was an audition for a community theater that was doing Oliver. And so I auditioned and I got cast as Oliver. So Oliver for me, because it's just I've done the show three times in total in my life, once as a child, once as a teenager, and a few years ago to Arena Stage. There's something about when I was a kid wanting to get into this world, and when you are Oliver, you're around the adults so much, so you're almost treated like another adult. So my best friends became these like 30, 40-year-old people who were the coolest people in the world to me, and that's I wanted to be like them. So that was my kind of gateway in. What about you?
I don't know. That's really tricky for me because I literally spent the first 20 years of my life in such a religious world that it was the music and everything was so much like, the Ten Commandments and stuff. But I think as an actor, what probably influenced me in my writing a little bit was my performance and the journey with Jesus Christ Superstar
Hmm.
because I loved the idea of the mob mentality in the piece that makes everyone just kind of group together and make a choice, whether it's good or bad. Pippin, with
Mhm.
the allegories and the mystery of what is really being said in that piece. And then also, thirdly, I think just the structure and sort of the perfect model of Fiddler on the Roof of how to construct tradition and then have tradition be challenged throughout, maybe. But I've never really thought about that. So I'm going to think about that some more.
Well, it's not like what's your favorite musical, because that's different. Gateway is
Sure,
different
sure,
than
sure,
favorite.
sure, sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for me it was without knowing it. I loved One Night in Bangkok when I heard that song back in whatever 84 or 85 or whatever it was, not knowing it was from a musical, but just loving the lyrics and the everything. But I think Phantom was probably the ultimate, what's this? And then I discovered there's lots of other shows better than Phantom, but you always have to have the gateway, which
Yeah.
opens the door. So
And
now let's
me too, because it was horror.
right. Nice. So let's talk about the parallel lines of Matthew and Stephen and how those two parallel lines met. I know you met in college, but how did that happen?
Had auditions for Pippin the
It
musical.
was at the audition for Pippin the musical.
Yeah.
I was supposed to have been Lewis.
Have I brought up something that shouldn't have
No.
been brought up?
No, no, no. We met there auditioning for the show Pippin, and so
I was wearing nothing but a pair of tights.
so but we became friends before anything else. And we were drawn to the same kind of things. We liked the same kind of things, and that's why Pippin is so dear to our hearts. We had a song from Pippin done at our wedding when we got married in 2013.
Nice.
So yeah,
Which Pippin song?
with you, of course. Yeah.
Nice. So the question is, what made you want to start writing together? It's different than meeting, being friends and relationships and stuff, but writing is a whole different thing. That's a whole different, teamwork. What made you decide to work together like that?
We were not writing together initially.
Right.
What happened was I was putting Edgar Allan Poe's poetry to music, and our house burnt down. We moved in with the artistic director of Signature Theater, Eric Schaefer, at the time. He caught me playing the piano, said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm putting Edgar Allan Poe's poetry to music." And in 2006, the world premiere of Nevermore was produced at Signature Theater with orchestrations by Jonathan Tunick.
Mhm.
Boom. And then I started becoming a commissioned writer with Signature as I was performing there. And Stephen always had an idea to write the musical
Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead. And I was like, "You're nuts. That's not happening."
10?
So in 2010-ish, we raised the money and we had a reading, we had a professional workshop, we got the show mounted. Anyways, what we came up with Night of the Living Dead was we basically cut out all the zombies. So the fear factor was just really people in a house experiencing the other.
Mhm.
So it didn't become quite the zombie show that maybe people thought it was going to be, but it was a very good a good idea to have the show done like that. And at this point, we can't produce the show.
Yeah, I mean,
It got very sticky. We're not sure how to talk about it.
no, it's just that the Image 10 folks who own the rights to that, they were entertaining conversations with us for a while, but then the window kind of passed, and now the show's been produced like 3 times in three different states.
When there were no rights,
Right, when it was
Mm.
still public
Yeah.
domain.
it was in public domain, and now it hasn't.
But they have their own officially licensed version that is like a comedy. So they weren't interested in taking themselves seriously, I guess, which is interesting since it's in the Museum of Modern Art. for being a horror film. But I digress.
But that's what kicked off our writing team.
Okay.
Since then, we got the 5 year Bold New Works at Creative Cauldron that we produced a new show.
Yeah,
One,
explain what that is.
we were asked to write a show every year for 5 years,
Hmm.
and the first show was Turn of the Screw, then The Monsters of the Villa Diodati, Kaleidoscope, Witch, and then on air. Since then, we've written other things. Ichabod that just was nominated for the Charles MacArthur Award.
Silver Bells.
Silver Bells, which has been done regionally and around the area, that is owned by Broadway Licensing. And then, of course, we have an upcoming commission with a theater in New York to write a piece about the brothers, one who has a theater named after him in Manhattan, and the other who shot a president.
Hmm.
It may or may not rhyme with Booth.
I'll have to think about that one for a bit. And
Yeah.
being Canadian, at least I'd have an excuse for not knowing it, but I've seen Assassins, so I'm good. But to bring up Silver Bells, let's kind of just give a backstory of how we kind of hooked up and met, is that a while ago, I was talking with Broadway Licensing, and they gave me a bunch of shows that they'd like to promote. So I added it to my sampler platter, and I've been playing Silver Bells for a long time. And then I think I forget, one of you reached out and said, "Hey, we played you playing this song. I did not know that." And I'm so glad to finally get to meet you because unfortunately I've lost touch with Broadway Licensing, with changes and the top and all that stuff. But I'm glad you reached out. And it's funny. That happens all the time. I play stuff that I don't even know I'm playing. Well, I know I'm playing, but you don't know I'm playing. And so thank you, just as a sidebar, for reaching out and letting me know.
Christine Purcell.
Christina Purcell.
Christina Purcell reached out to Steven and said, "Is this y'all?"
So Christina Purcell was an actress who was in a summer stock production of State Fair with us in 1998.
Wow.
Spoken since, not for any reason other than just we fell out of touch. And
Yeah.
she emailed, I guess she looked us up, found our website, emailed us through the website, and said, "Is this Steven and Matt? I'm listening to musical theater radio at the gym, and this song comes up." And I'm like, "Oh, that's such a great song. Who wrote that?" Connor and Smith. Well, wait a second. And then I was like, "Christina, so great to hear from you. What is musicaltheaterradio.com? And how can I get in touch with them?" So, serendipitous things like that are just, the way of the world sometimes.
What was the song?
It was While the Getting's Good.
While the Getting's Good was based on my grandfather, Howard, who gave a silver dollar to my mother for my younger brother's birthday, a week before my brother's birthday. And he said, "Penny, this is for Chad's birthday." And she said, "Howard, his birthday's not for another week." And he said, "You get it while the getting's good." And 2 days later, he was dead. So that became
A happy Christmas song.
well, no, it became sort of a motif of living in the moment at that time.
I have to tell you, though, that of course, people know what we've written. We've not written all darker material. There's some other shows in there, Kaleidoscope and On Air, especially, that are a little more show busy. But when people found out we were doing a Christmas show, they were like, "Oh, that's really cool. You guys are kind of like doing a different vibe." And like, well, it opens with a coffin center stage. So of course it does. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. I'd be curious to hear about your writing styles. Who writes book, who writes lyrics, who writes music? Is it a combination? I'd love to hear your process.
I would say that, well, I write the book, he writes the music, I write the lyrics, he writes but yet,
I know I no longer really write lyrics. I
edit them.
I edit or ask or change or talk and say, "Can we do something different here?"
But it's hard to explain how he ends and where I start, because sometimes I'll also say, and I can play the piano, but not as well as he can. and I don't know chordal structure as well. So I'll say it sounds something like this, but make that pretty. And then he makes it 20 times better. And
And
then
then we have a beautiful friend and colleague, Dr. Warren Freeman, who lives in the small town of Manhattan. And he is our music supervisor for our shows since like 2015,
14.
2014. So we've had a 10-year relationship with him. So he orchestrates and voices all of our notated work. So what we end up with, we then of course collaborate with him to turn into the correct range, the correct style. Um, but like last night, we're working on a new show that is not commissioned, that we're going to kind of just take out to some of our backers and see who wants to back this show about Emily Dickinson's poetry. And I had already worked on two songs, and the lyrics right now currently are the poetry with maybe just a book from Stephen, but um, we're always just kind of collaborating together. It's very fluid, and it's interesting. I've had many writing partners, um, and every writing partner, of course, is a very different dating experience.
Mhm.
And I think because Stephen and I are married, but are friends primarily from college, knowing that there are so many possibilities under that umbrella of choices, and they're not wrong and they're not right. They're just better choices and not so better choices.
Mhm.
So it kind of alleviates the struggle of trying to make something perfect or imperfect. It's just maybe a better choice on that journey, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we're still cooking.
So tell us a few. You've mentioned a number of the shows. Tell us about a couple of them that you'd love for us to know about.
Well, why don't you tackle Monsters of the Villa Diodati?
Okay.
Okay, Monsters of the Villa Diodati is based on a true historical event.
Yeah, it's historical fiction, I would say, because nobody knows exactly what happened,
I
but
think those songs were sung
in
in
1816,
in
yeah.
late South.
It's about the famous summer that Lord Byron and Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, Claire Claremont, and Dr. John Polidori summered on Lake Geneva and challenged themselves to write the greatest ghost story of all time. And Frankenstein was written, and so was The Vampire, written by Polidori after he picked up a scrap that Lord Byron had started. And then, of course, years later, Bram Stoker read The Vampire and said, "Well, I can do this better," and wrote Dracula. So out of that summer, it's what's so interesting about it is they all were in such strange places in their lives. They're all very young, of course. Byron was the oldest, but still kind of youngish. But they were all facing their own kind of demons, and they were all in exile from England for morality reasons and whatnot. And it was the summer of darkness where I think it was Mount Tambora erupted, and it was just dark all the time that summer, and everyone thought the world was ending, and it became this like
That's when it started to end.
that's what it started and it's still ending. Um, it became this like bacchanalia of a summer, and drugs and it like a true rock star summer,
And
and
and the music kind of is many different colors. There's like a rock score for Lord Byron. There's like a more classical score for Claire. There's some classic music theater moments. It's got a lot of different genres, which is kind of cool.
mhm. But we wanted it to be like a string quartet because that was the popular music of the time. So the five of them kind of have their own individual sound, yet can also work in tandem
Mhm.
perfectly in harmony. And the thing that's cool, it's our only, as of yet, I think that'll change soon, but as of yet, it's our only two-act musical. We like to get in, get out, like clean. And nobody's attention span is that long anymore, including ours. So it's just like we like to kind of get in, execute the story, no frills, leave with your own impression, have a good night. But Monsters is like there was too much to encapsulate and too big a discussion because not only is it about those characters' historical lives, it's about the lives that they create in these stories. It's also about what the effect of their creation has on those around them. Because the whole thing about being a writer, being a creator is, you take that pen, you dip that well into yourself and you put it on the paper, your own experiences, they create the monster that you see when you look in the mirror, and that's Mary Shelley. And the vampire that sucks the life out of the room, that's Lord Byron. And, so the whole thing had bigger ramifications. And they had so many discussions that summer because you can follow in several of the diaries of them that still exist, although they've probably been drastically edited. Um, they talk about the discussions that they had just about life, and these were like heavy discussions. No one was clearly on their phone. No one was on the computer. They were just talking about like, what does life mean? And so, yeah.
Stephen keeps a folder of interesting articles, and when he sees something throughout his lifetime that he thinks is interesting, he just prints it out and throws it in there.
Mhm.
And then we have a date night that we go to a steakhouse here locally when we want to have a business meeting about our work. Although we never order steak. We go there and we open this folder and start looking at all these like fun ideas. Well, one of those ideas was the history of the radio
Mm.
Mhm.
and how it was created in Pittsburgh. Well, not Pittsburgh, but
Wilkinsburg.
Wilkinsburg, just outside of Pittsburgh. And so we wrote a love letter to this idea called On Air, and it is about the true story of Frank and Flora
Conrad.
Conrad and their journey with the radio. And you can talk more about this, but let me just say that when this show opened here in Virginia, we had a gentleman come and see it, and he was like, I can't believe you guys wrote a show about Meemaw and Peepaw. We were like, what?
Wow.
And this gentleman lives like maybe 2 miles that way near Delray, if you're going towards the Potomac. And he was the great grandson of Frank and Flora Conrad, who developed the radio. Historically, this guy had so many patents, so many inventions for the Westinghouse. It was a really cool story, and all the music is sort of like an homage to the 1920s.
I found this because it's one of our like let's say more classic music theater shows, that and Kaleidoscope. Um, I found this story because I wanted to do something about War of the Worlds, and I knew I
Mhm.
couldn't. There was already the musical,
Yeah.
but I thought, okay, if I can't do something about War of the Worlds, I was always obsessed with War of the Worlds when I was growing up because my Nana, who played me all those things, also played me that. And she made me turn out, the lights, and she was in New York when it happened or whatever and told me what it felt like. So I've always like had that in the back of my mind. So then I thought, oh, let's do a thing about like turning the dial or something that's about like radio through time, and just like tune into all these different vignettes and have different style of radio come out that indicates the decade that we're in, whatever, and find like a through line of interest through time. And that was kind of the plan with this radio show. And then I was going through different stories of radio things, and I found this story about the anniversary of KDKA. I grew up south of Pittsburgh, so that was my radio station growing up. And I was like, KDKA, that's back home. And it was like the anniversary of radio, and Flora Conrad, now elderly, laying in a cot smoking a cigarette, is talking about the first broadcast and how somebody from Westinghouse broke her coffee pot and they never bought her a new one. And it was about like the first broadcast was of the 1920 election results. And so they wanted to know who was going to win the
Who was
election.
the two people?
It was, Harding and um,
I don't remember.
we wrote the show. We should know. Anyway, the election wasn't the point. The point
Yeah.
was she was a suffragist, and she was she was the one who wore the pants in the relationship, whereas Frank Conrad was, they called him the sleepy genius. He was up late tinkering with his, radio device so many hours into the night, and she would always wait for him to go to bed. Sometimes she would chop the wood for the fire for him so he could keep thinking about his things. But Matt immediately said, "That's our musical. That we don't need all the other stuff because nobody knows that story." And I will say that since we wrote it in 2018, 2019, when I first was Googling stuff, like you had to go down some wormholes to find anything on him. There's more now.
A
But
friend of ours who is a dramaturg, researcher for
well, she worked at the Holocaust Museum.
yeah,
Yeah.
like really serious things. She told us, hey, if you want some information about these people, I can get into places that you can't get into. And so she did. She found just
Hundreds of
about
articles
them that we could not Google.
because they were very public in their discussions with the Pittsburgh papers. It's just that those are in like an
Different
archive now
someplace
that,
else.
yeah. So we were able to actually get a sense of who they were and that she was, part of the ladies tennis club and that she did that, all these things that she did, all, of course, all the patents that he made. But we wanted to make this story about the America kind of dawning into 1920, moving into 1920, moving into the Roaring Twenties, and how exciting all the progress was, not knowing what was ahead, of course. And so that was kind of an exciting thing that I've talked about for way too long now. But
Yeah.
yeah, we talked about monsters and we talked about on air. So I guess we don't have favorite children. Those are just like
Yeah.
Well,
good story.
another interesting thing that we did was several years ago, I was commissioned and I had won an American Music Voices Project Award through Signature Theater and the Ted Shen Foundation. And I was supposed to pick a title of a show to do. I chose the story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, with another writer. And I just felt at that time that the partnership really was not going in the right direction. It felt like
With the other writer.
with the other writer, it felt like it was two different stories. And we've all seen those musicals where the book is written in one point of view and then the music's another point of view. And it's just like, oh, it's just not quite married together. So years later, Steve and I re-envisioned that story into what's now called Ichabod. It's going to be in New York in Hell's Kitchen this fall. And it really is just an homage, a very clear homage to Washington Irving. There's no Johnny Depp spin of, this character, that character. It literally is just the Sleepy Hollow version of the story. We were always in love with the Disney cartoon
Mhm.
because we think the Disney cartoon kind of tells the story the best.
It's the closest to this original.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a favorite thing, and that was the one that was also nominated for the Charles MacArthur, which of course was Helen Hayes's husband.
We also just finished a world premiere in Baltimore. We don't have a recording for that. We wish we did.
Wait, I do.
Well, it's live though.
Yeah, it sounds like it was in my purse.
It's called Whitechapel. And again, you're sensing themes, but this was about the five women that Jack the Ripper killed. But it more than being about him is more about them. It's almost like 6 minus 1. But it's not as poppy. It's very much music hall of the time, 1888 kind of pastiche world. And it was done in a bar in Baltimore. And I thought that was a really cool idea. The company there, we've worked with several times, Still Point Theater. They do like kind of environmental productions and whatever. And I thought, well, there are more bars than theaters in the country. So this might be a really interesting experiment to have it done. I know that there's
The show is set in a bar.
in a bar, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been other shows to do that, like Murder Ballad or whatever else, but it was our own kind of attempt at trying to put you in an atmosphere. It's the Ten Bells was the pub that a lot of the prostitutes went to, one of
Mhm.
the oldest pubs in the world, I think. So to set you in the room with these women and with this person that you don't see that they keep having conversations with and then they disappear.
Yeah, it was a very interesting evening, almost like you were watching these people work the wait staff or the help at the bar, and then all of a sudden just one of them doesn't show up for work. And it's like, oh, someone's missing. So it's not quite a commentary in it's like you're discovering in real time, like that someone didn't show up for work. And anyways, it's a very interesting piece. We were very happy.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you guys about you've obviously written lots of shows over time. What progression have you seen in your writing skills and styles from when you first started to now? Is there anything that you've discovered or you look back and go, "Oh yeah, that was because, when you start, you don't know what you don't know, and then you progress." But I'd love to hear how things have changed for you guys. Have you learned things?
Well, I think we've also written about 20 children's shows for our theater, Creative Cauldron, which of course has to sit in its own sort of
Yeah.
way of communicating to the audience because it's a little bit simpler, or maybe not. It's got to be more accessible in a
It's
way
just
for
different.
it's different.
It's different style.
Um, I would say that this is how I also know when I'm talking to someone who doesn't quite know the shorthand is I think the longer you're in the business, the longer you're kind of making that reduction sauce in the kitchen, the more it becomes a very quick shorthand. So between Warren, Stephen, and myself, now that when we're talking about our own work, we're not precious. We're not, I mean, yes, can we disagree? And for a moment, like this Whitechapel was a good example. The guy that was producing it, there was a letter from a person, Jack the Ripper, possibly, that wrote a letter to the police department. And he said, guys, I think this should be like a musical moment. This should be sung. And we were walking the dogs that day, and I was kind of like, how dare she call talk? I thought, what? And then of course the longer we walked the puppies, I thought, maybe. And so that night I came home from work and Steve had printed out the letter and there it sat on the piano. And I thought, oh, I know what's happening tonight. And we turned that letter into a sung moment that did not sound like the rest of the show because we wanted to make sure it sounded like a different outside voice that
Ugh,
didn't match.
it gives me chills.
And
So creepy.
there's just little shorthand things in our life now that we don't have to talk things out quite as much because we already know, okay, this is going to be this. Okay, this is going to be this. Um, I would say that makes things happen much quicker.
Yeah, I I'm not as afraid anymore about like I know what you do. You write the crappy version, then you thin it out, and then you make that better. And then I know the lyrics I give you for this first feel at this song that's got to feel something like a this. These lyrics are crappy. They're tent pole lyrics. We'll
Mhm.
get them better. And refine, refine, refine. It's just a shorthand that after you've done it a dozen times more with the children's shows, but they're different, you just kind of go, this is exactly where we're supposed to be. And you don't doubt yourself. You're just like, now, I will say time crunches are real
Mhm.
and deadlines are real, but I think we kind of get more excited by those than anything else because as any writer is, we're constantly writing. We're
Mhm.
walking down the street, we're at the supermarket writing. So it's always there. The first one I ever wrote was, Night of the Living Dead with Matt. And it was one of my favorite movies that I've seen 5,000 times. How am I going to write a script that captures that but is different? And Matt at one point said, "Oh, you've got to like start coming up with the scenes and the stuff." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I am." And then one day I just sat down at the keyboard and just did the whole thing.
Mhm.
Now it wasn't perfect, but that's quite the opposite of me now. Now I'm just like, no, 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 take one scene at a time. Take one, create an outline, always create an outline, beginning, middle, end, fill in the hours on the clock, tick in what makes sense, and
There was a producer
yeah.
director in Baltimore who just did our Whitechapel, who also did our Nevermore, and also did our Witch. But he called Steven one day. We were at the gym, and he said, "I want to do your Witch." And between the two of us, we knew that Witch, when it was produced at Creative Cauldron several years ago, that was the one book that we were always like, we've got to go back and redo this. What that wasn't our. It was because
The moment.
yeah, the moment was about a moment that we thought.
It was very 2018.
Yeah, we thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the election, and we thought the word witch was going to be anyways. So Steven said, "Man, this is the one show that's not quite ready." And I kind of said, "Well, now's the time. Someone wants this show. Now's the time." Steven threw out the entire book, asked the company, "When do you need this new book by?" In 48 hours, Steven had a new book to these people, and it was produced, and now it's been produced again. But that's how quick. And I think part of it's because we do eat 3 meals together. So it's like our writing team doesn't really ever have to wait for the email to come back. They say, "What do you
Mhm.
think?"
Yeah.
We can be upstairs brushing our teeth and say, "Well, no, I think she comes out and she sings this."
I love that you use the word precious for work because so many people, especially at the beginning, this is my baby. This is how it has to be, and you gotta learn to let it go. And everything is fluid and needs to change sometimes. And you might have written this beautiful, perfect song, but it just doesn't work, right? And you can't just stop trying to shoehorn it in. Just just put it away for now, right? And I love how you brought that up, and it's so important for writers to realize that.
Oh yeah, it'll appear in a show down the line. Just put it in a folder.
Yeah.
We've done that so many times. I'm like, I love that song. It
Well,
doesn't
well,
work.
last night we were talking about the Booth show, or
Truth
the
show.
Truth
Yeah.
show. And we have two songs that might be the same song written in a different way. And we were like, well, wait, this is this song, but this also says the same thing. But I kind of like this song better. Let's keep this song for now. This will be our working song. And maybe the Kingdom of Illusion song, the working title, which is a great title, Kingdoms of Illusions, is like based on my career. Um, we'll keep that and just see, if that lands on something later. But we no longer really are uh fixed. We're not a fixed interest rate when we set our
No,
numbers.
I mean, and last night I was like, this song, these lyrics that I just wrote are basically the same sentiment as this song we worked on 2 nights ago. Why are we duplicating our efforts here? Why are we hitting the audience over the head with a club? They're gonna get it. They're not dumb.
And of course, sometimes
You
when
know.
Steven says that, I'll let him come to that conclusion and think to myself, oh, good. I'm glad Steven thinks that. Let me let him think about that for just a few more moments before I say,
Yeah.
when you just said that that was not a good idea, I think maybe I agree.
And a lot of that comes from the fact that if I've got this thing in my head, and this is always super annoying, and Matt's always great at helping edit me, but I am explaining this story to myself like I'm stupid when I'm writing my first draft. I'm like, make everything clear and make it make sense, and I write way too much.
Yeah.
Then we go back and we're like, take all these words out. What is the base point? We get it. But I have to do that just so I understand it myself. Because if I don't, everybody's, hopeless.
Yeah.
I think also we were professional actors for up until what, 2018,
Yeah.
our last shows. Um, I think we see our writing not only in the lens of a writer, but also in the lens of an actor,
Mhm.
also the lens of we both direct and a lens of a director, and also a little bit I teach kids.
Mhm.
And I I have a class tomorrow morning. I teach acting, four classes of acting. I also teach private piano to kids, and I'm very hard on them on expressing their storytelling, and that no matter how brilliant the story is in your mind, no matter how great you think the story is, if you don't let me know that story, I don't see the story. So the book's not been written. And the brilliance of Stephen King is not what's in his mind, but the ability to let everyone else read what's in his mind. And I think that that's an important key to remember. I don't care how good the song is. I don't care if you can play in B flat minor, but if you can't convey the same emotion, we have one little secret in our household. When I write or direct, or you write and direct, for me personally, and Stephen will say to me, "Did you cry?" And I'll go, "Oh, I didn't." And I'm a big crier when it comes to just being a sensitive person. And if I don't get moved, and by crying, I don't necessarily mean like crying, but if I don't get moved
Mhm.
to a point in the show where I am in love with the character or the whatever, it's not working. And I can find that same emotional connection right before Sweeney throws Mrs. Lovett in the fire. My God, are you kidding me? She loved him so much. And anyway, we just watched Sweeney Todd.
We did. We did.
And if there are any of our listeners who haven't, oh, I'm sorry.
Spoiler alert, I guess.
Well, we both just read Richard Shook's book, How Sondheim Changed My Life.
Mhm.
So there's a big learning lesson in all of those Sondheim shows now that's in our living room.
Uh, Matthew, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us and introducing yourselves and your work to myself, the listeners. Let's talk about, how do people get to learn more about you? The socials, the websites, all that fun stuff.
Well, hopefully the website's up. We'll
I
look into
know.
that.
I keep looking at it on my phone and I feel like I'm being punished.
Well, the website, when working, which it should be, because I'll have to call somebody and say what's going on, is www.connor. Now that's Conner, not OR. So ConnorSmithMusicals.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok under, again, Connor and Smith, Connor with an ER. We're also on Patreon. We have the Connor and Smith Show podcast on Spotify, Apple, everywhere you get your podcasts. We talk to other Broadway actors that we've worked with, other composers. We've talked to Michael John LaCusa. We've talked to a whole bunch of people that theater audiences would remember. And right now we are actually diving into movie musicals and talking about, we're in the Sondheim era right now, but after that we might go to Lesser, we might go to Kander and Ebb, and we just kind of break down the movies and, you know, did they work, did they not, what did work, what didn't work, and all of that. Because honestly, we're students of musical theater ourselves, and we're fascinated by what works and what doesn't, because it helps us figure out, oh, this really gets me because of this. So those are all the places you can find us. And thank you for searching us out. We appreciate it. And we appreciate musicaltheaterradio.com.
Well, thank you for the plug. But and this probably won't air for a couple of weeks after our talk here. So by that point, the website should be all good and no one should have any problems. But before we go, I do have one question that's been niggling at the back of my brain since the middle of the interview. You go to a steakhouse and you don't order steak. What do you guys order?
We always order,
Yeah.
and we share their buffalo chicken wings, which we adore.
Yeah.
Stephen will get their loaded potato soup,
So good.
which
Yeah.
he doesn't let me have any of. I will order this beautifully strawberry nut salad that's very whatever. And then he will order their chicken fingers to take home.
Yeah,
And
I'm just not a big steak person.
no, we like steak. It's
Yeah.
just like after two bites, you're kind of like, I should have just gotten the wings.
Right.
I hear you. They're not a sponsor. If they want to be one, they can be,
Right,
but they're
right,
not a
right,
sponsor.
right.
So. Again, thank you for the both of you for coming on and talking to me. It's so great to meet the people that I play, because a lot of times I don't. I just play all this music and I never get to meet them per se, or talk to them. And it's so exciting to hear, the behind the scenes, the reasons, the whys, the hows. of these songs, of these shows that we're playing. And it just gives a little bit more in-depth, knowledge of what we're listening to. So thank you guys for coming on and talking to me today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So we were just speaking with Matt Connor and Stephen Gregory Smith about their career and all their shows, and we play them on the radio, so you'll have to check those out whenever you are listening to the station. Tune in next week as we speak with another guest or guest about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.